Hi folks, Travis Fox here with FoxOptic.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new Pulsar Oryx XG35 LRF. I'm going to run you through the device, all of its features, button commands, kind of operationally everything you would need to know about the thing. I will kind of forewarningly tell you this is going to be an extremely long video, but I will catalog things so that you're able to jump through and find the relevant information if you don't want to watch the whole thing and be able to know how to operate certain sub-functions of the device. So let's start off by taking a quick look at the unit. Here on the top of the unit, we're going to see the button operation pad. At the back, we're going to have diopter adjustment right forward of that diopter adjustment. So the diopter adjustment is going to allow us to focus our eye on the display. When you're adjusting that, I would recommend that you keep the lens cap closed, adjust that diopter until you get the numbers and the values on the screen as clear as possible, and then that will have it set to your eye. Be aware if you're wearing glasses like me, I keep a set of cheaters around pretty much all the time, and you're taking those on and off. Obviously, that might affect your diopter control, and you might need to readjust that if you have them on or off, or if you wear glasses permanently and they get to fogging on you, lift them up, a diopter correction back there might be required. Forward of that, so that's going to set that, and unless you're changing like that, generally not going to retouch that. So if you don't wear glasses and you're just adjust that to your eye and nothing's changing, then you're probably, once you adjust that, not going to need to adjust it again. Forward of that, we are going to have index finger focusing adjustment. So similar to binoculars, you're going to be able to have your hand on the device and make adjustments to that. You can do it one-handed if you prefer. Personally, I like to hold the device like this in my right hand and lay my left hand on there and adjust those, so I'm using my right hand to stabilize and I'm doing the commands with my left hand. It's honestly, that's a preference thing. They've set it up to be completely ambidextrous and make it to where you could use it single-handedly, left or right. But again, for me, I find the two-handed operation to be a lot more stable if I'm hand-holding it. But to each their own. In front of that, we're going to see our menu layout. So menu button in the middle, and then basically the select buttons up, so those are going to represent up and down buttons to the left and right, and then menu in the center. So, I'll explain that later on as we're out in the field, but the menu button is going to open your menus, and then the left and right buttons let you manipulate up and down. And then in the large menu or the main menu, sometimes you have to confirm things by producing a second press on that menu button to confirm things. Forward of that, laser rangefinder button. Again, I'll go over the operation of that out in the field, but that is the LRF button. In front of that, we have the camera button or the record button, whatever you want to call that. And then forward of that, the power button. So the power button, pretty self-explanatory. It's going to let you turn the thing on and off. And then it also is the button that you will push if you want to do an override nuke or non-uniformity correction or calibration, whatever you want to call it. So that button will allow you to put short press on that button is going to put you into sleep mode if you just press it and hold it until the timer comes up and drop off of it. If you press and hold it till you get the 3, 2, 1 countdown timer, once it gets down to 0 and the screen goes black, drop off of it, shut the device fully off. If you just short press and release it while the device is running and you don't hold it long enough to start that either the sleep mode or the shutdown sequence, then it will force a calibration. Even if you're in automatic mode, you can force a calibration at any time. The design layout of this thing is phenomenal. You've got a charge port down here on the bottom, which is capable of charging both the internal battery and the removable dropout battery in the back here, and so the combination of those two is going to give you about 12 hours runtime. We have a 1,500-yard laser rangefinder built into the device, along with 640 by 480 thermal resolution, paired with a 35mm focal length and 1.0 aperture 35mm lens, which is going to give us about a 12.4 degree or 12.5 degree horizontal field of view. So, somewhere in the neighborhoods of about 65 foot at 100 yards of field of view, which is really, that's a good happy medium on a 640, 480 device in terms of a nice wide field of view, but decent identification range on the back end. So they've really tried to hit this device down the middle and be as versatile as possible when making a 640, 480 device. The The physical size of it I find to be very compact and handy given everything that it can do. I mean, obviously I can throw the thing over here in my pocket pretty easily, pull that out, you know. It's just a really, really good size. The device itself, very rugged. I mean, you'll see I've got another video where I show off the ballistics. That's something that I haven't mentioned yet. It's fully capable. It has an integrated ballistics computer so that you can enter a ballistics profile, use the thing to solve miller rating or MOA come-ups for you. So whether you're using it in combination, for just the range and using it with another night division that maybe does not have those ballistic capabilities, so you can get an idea of your holdovers, or in potential, like would be in a daytime scope, where I show it in another video that I have. If you haven't seen that, go and look at it, where I shoot this loophole right here and we dial the come-ups, and we're using it in more of a day scenario where I'm using, where you could be using the thermal to fast detect targets, get on them, be able to lock onto them and take a range, and then have that ballistics information to enter into your day scope. It really pretty phenomenal. I can't reiterate that enough. I think the thing is a home run. I've seen all the other devices that are on the market, and I've yet to see one that encompasses all of those features and puts it in that compact and durable of package. But that's not what we're here for today, is for me to sell the thing to you. We're here today so that I can teach you how to run it. So with that said, let's get out in the field. We'll be going through the full operation of the thing. I'll be right back with you. Okay folks, so here we are out in the field. I'm going to be walking you through, this is again the new Oryx XG35 LRF. We're going to start off by going through what the information you're going to see on the main screen is telling you. And then as we progress, we'll go into the quick menu and the main menu and kind of build on that and get through everything. But we're going to start now on the main screen. As you can see the conditions out here, I don't know how well that you're going to be able to see that in the video camera, hopefully pretty well. It's actually raining a little bit right now. It was overcast yesterday evening and kind of drizzly, rainy all night. So I intentionally picked this condition because it's pretty rough, and I want to be able to kind of show you how those amplification levels, or what I'll sometimes refer to as mode algorithms, are working. So basically, that normal, high, and ultra, this is a really good condition to show the usefulness of those off in. And so I kind of picked this, but we're going to go through, we're going to start off and we're going to go all the way through the main menu. So let's jump inside the device. So first thing I want to bring to your attention is in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. You're going to see that little circle in there with the dot on it. That is telling you that we are in the white hot mode currently. So the objects out there that are appearing white in the display, there's some squirrels over there or some birds. Those are, they're gleaming white versus their background. So that's, that's how they're being depicted in the thermogram. They're showing up because their temperature is hotter than the things around them in white. So let's talk about the buttons up here. On top of the device, you're going to have a 3-button layout at the rear. That is, the center button is menu, and then the right and left buttons are going to be basically, your selecting buttons. So up and down, we'll think of them as up and down to move through menus or to select things from menus. And then, like if you're in the main menu, sometimes you'll need a confirmation press to accept something. Again, that's going to be a short press on the main menu button. Most of the buttons have long and short press functions, and so that's where we're going to start, is on the left hand side button over here. The long press function on that button is to switch your color palettes currently. And so if you do a long press on that button, you'll see where the palette inverts. And the palette it is inverting to, in this case, is black hot. That is signaled to me by the little black dot down there in the circle in the lower left corner of the screen. And you can see obviously that the image changed. Those squirrels or birds went from being, I think they're birds because they're just sitting there. Usually a squirrel will move around quite a bit more than that. But anyway, so those birds are just sitting there, and they're gleaming white when I'm in the white hot, but then they're turning black when I'm in black hot. And so likewise, that's why they're giving you that circle down there, because in some situations it can be kind of hard if there's not something out there to kind of tell you whether you're in white hot or black hot, if you have, depending on how you have contrast and brightness set. So that's the idea of the circle. Additionally, you have, I think there's a total of 10 color palettes that you can choose between in the main menu. Whatever you choose from that menu is always going to be what I'll call the secondary palette. So anytime you're doing long press on that left-hand button, you're going to invert between white hot and whatever you've chose from the menu. So I'll show you that real quick. We're going to do a long press up here on the main menu button. We're going to go down here to the color modes, short press on the button to get in there, and then we'll arrow there to, let's say, the green color palette. And we're going to short press to select that or to confirm that. And then we can either wait for it to time out on its own, or a long press on the main menu button will get you back out a little faster. And so there you can see now I'm in a green color palette. That green color palette is very useful in the sense that it's still pretty high visual acuity. In other words, the gradient is easy for our eye to see. We see a lot of green really well, similar to how we see white and black. So like some of the red palettes will be very eye friendly, but you won't feel like you see as much resolution. There's just as much there. It's just our eyes can't discern the red differential as well. So the green palette's a nice mix between a nice soft palette to look at in terms of eye fatigue, but at the same token, it's going to give you pretty good visual acuity, and you're going to feel like there's a lot of resolution there. Whereas the white hot palette, you're going to get the most resolution in white or black hot, but if your image encompasses a lot of white color, you're triggering all your rod and cone cells inside your eyes, and potentially that will aid or add to eye fatigue, because this eye setting over here, in my case where I'm right eye dominant, this eye setting over here and it's not getting anything at all. It's in ambient black darkness, and then this one is catching all that light. My brain's trying to mix those together, and it's used to mixing them together and making a signal out of it, but in that particular instance, it can't do that because it's only getting fed from the one eye. That's where binoculars, if you're scanning super long periods of time and you're willing to go with a little bit bigger device, binoculars are obviously going to give you the lowest eye fatigue because it allows your eyes to mix the channels the way they should. But then the downside to binoculars is physically a bit larger, and more costly. And you can't just throw them in a pocket the way you can with this thing. So, so let's go back into the device. We've explained that. And one thing I do want to bring to your attention, you can see where I went to the green hot, it's pretty intuitive that I'm in the green palette. So, there's no circle down there to represent that. Again, if I long press on that button, you'll see when I go back over to white hot, boom, the circle pops back on to let me know what mode I'm in. So with that said, next thing over there we're going to see is the amplification levels, or what I will again sometime refer to as mode algorithms. Basically, what those are doing for you is, you can see in this condition where it's wet, there's not been a lot of thermal loading. So thermal loading is what the inanimate objects out there are relying on in order to produce emissivity, or to radiate that heat that the thermal sensor is able to detect the differential in. And so when you have a really overcast, dreary, high moisture day like today, the problem gets to be is that, one, the things weren't thermally loaded in the first place. In other words, the sun wasn't out there to, think of them as batteries. It wasn't out there to charge them up, so those darker objects absorbing more heat, the lighter objects reflecting more heat and making a lot of thermal contrast for the sensor to form an image out of. Your active objects really ain't going to care, or actively emitting objects like a coyote or a hog or something like that, because they're generating heat and they're constantly pumping that out. So even in a dreary condition, those squirrels or birds are going to show up relatively well in terms of their heat output signal, because they're actively putting the heat out. In some instances, I would argue they're going to show up even better, because the fact that they're wet, makes their fur, their feathers a little less insulative and a little more conductive, and they're able to radiate that heat out, and produce a better silhouette in some instances when they're wet, even though the background might look poor. And so as to how that works, what will happen is, when you get into a really high air moisture, the air between you and the object you're looking at is also full of moisture and impeding that signal, or absorbing that heat that's coming through the air. So that also kind of mucks things up. So what this thing's doing in the normal, high, and ultra modes is, in normal mode, it's spreading the gradient out as much as it can, as evenly as it can, to give you as much information in the image as possible. And while that might sound like, man, that's the one I'd want to run in a bad situation, the problem is it's counterproductive in the sense that it's spreading the gradient out as evenly as possible, and you'll end up with a large portion of the gradient containing the kind of low resolution, all at one temperature side of the equation. And so what you're going to do to boost that up potentially is shift that, not only shift that contrast gradient around, but expand and contract it a bit. So basically what they're doing in the algorithms or in these amplification levels is in normal, they're spreading it out like this and it encompasses the whole thing. And in the high mode, you know, we take just a portion of it over here towards the top in the higher range and focus more on it and less on this bottom, let's say 2/3. And then in the ultra mode, we do the same thing, you know, like scrunch that contrast down and focus it even more at the top and less, even less at the bottom, to try to pick up the things that might be informationally useful in terms of the image and build that out. But you really don't need to know all of that part of it. I'm just explaining it to you so you get a better understanding of how it works. But what I would recommend you do is just cycle between the 3 modes in a given condition before you make any other adjustments and see what the byproduct is. So like here, if I, and to do that, it short presses on that left button. So again, if you see where I do a short press on the left button, now I'm in the normal mode down there, and you can see where I can still pick those white targets up, but the entire image got a lot more grayed out, and it's just generally kind of drab. Where as I start to bring up the amplification levels and the contrast starts to kind of scrunch up relative to that stuff, you'll see where the detail starts to get a bit better in that background. So, you know, in this particular case, Ultra looks really, really good. If I had a lot of closer, larger targets out there, or if I had a lot of rocky outcrops or something that was causing a lot of temperature differential in the scene I was looking into, and I was able to take full advantage of, you know, that full color scale all throughout the image, then there are certainly instances where normal is going to look much, much better. So just be aware that's kind of how that works. What I would do is cycle between the 3 modes, see which one looks best for you, and then once you've determined which one looks best in a given situation, then I would go in and make brightness and contrast adjust. So the next thing we're going to see across there is going to be our mode, excuse me, we're going to see our shutter mode. So basically the next thing in there is telling us that we're in A for automatic mode. So in terms of calibration modes, what that's telling, that's what I was kind of drawing a blank on, is calibration mode. But anyways, the calibration mode is telling us that there's a shutter inside the device that closes occasionally. And basically when you're in automatic mode, it's going to do that automatically. It's going to see the values that it's feeding back to the display. The program sees those. And if it starts seeing a lot of vertical line formation or information containing the same values, it knows that the sensor is getting a little bit spatially lost and it's time to calibrate that. And so what will happen, there's a shutter in there that drops in front of the sensor. The program goes, okay, now all of those little bolometers should be reading the same value, and it adjusts everything. And what causes that is, you know, the ambient air conditions around the device are changing the case temperature, or like if I touch it or something like that. But then additionally, the biggest one is when you first turn the device on, the video and processor and everything warming up in there has, you know, kind of an ill effect in the sense that it's dumping heat in there around that bolometer, and it kind of destabilizes it. And so it'll have to calibrate more frequently when the device is first turned on, or potentially in a really windy, cold environment where you're touching it, not touching it, you know, like things like that are what's going to cause it to have to calibrate more or less frequently. In the A for automatic mode, it's going to just determine when it calibrates on its own and do it. Some, you know, in semi-automatic, the user is going to determine when to calibrate by pushing the blue power button. And then in the manual mode, same way, you're going to determine when to calibrate it, but that internal shutter is no longer, by pushing the blue power button, you're going to determine when it calibrates. But the internal shutter is no longer going to drop, and you're going to have to put the lens cap over the lens and have that be the thing that it's actually calibrating on. The reason I mention that is if you put the thing in manual mode, let's just go ahead and do that here. So down here, we're going to go to the again, I believe it's called the calibration modes, and you can see it right there. If we put it up here in manual, what you're going to see is if I calibrate, I'm going to have to tell it to do that by pushing this blue power button So now I've calibrated it without closing the lens, and you see where I get that. Hopefully that'll show up, and you can see where I get that kind of floating image inside there. That's what they'll call ghosted on top of the image. So if I was to take, let's say, the palm of my hand, and if you're gonna put the palm of your hand across it, you wanna make sure you're not touching that lens. But you know, if I would put the palm of my hand over that solidly, hit the button again, and force it to calibrate, you'll see now where I don't get that ghost image anymore. You know, and so where that could be relevant is in a shutter failure, or potentially, like, let's say you're in a situation where you don't want, there's a little bit of a tiny audible click when that shutter drops. If I did not want that, if I was in really close proximity hunting a fox or something like that, there might be some situations where it was a little quieter to just calibrate with my hand. But let's go ahead and we'll just leave it in there for right now. Or actually, no, I'm going to go ahead and put it back in auto so that you can see it calibrating. One other thing I want to bring your attention to, and we may or may not see it here right away, but when you're in automatic calibration mode, down there where the A is, occasionally you're going to see a little red. It'll turn red to draw your eye to it. You're going to see a little timer that'll pop up, and it'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it'll calibrate. The point of that is because when it does calibrate, essentially the image freezes for about a second, and they're just trying to warn you, hey, the thing's getting ready to do that. Again, if you don't like it doing it, you know, intermittently on its own, there's a reason you want to avoid that. Put it in semi-automatic mode is probably what I recommend, because then you won't have to use your palm of your hand to shutter it or the lens cap, and you can still do it just like it normally does, but it, you know, by a short press of the blue power button, but it won't catch you off guard. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, and you know, be watching for that in a little bit here, and you'll see that in the video. Next thing you're going to see across there is the 2.5x. That's telling us the magnification level that we're currently at. In the case of this unit, it's 2.5 to 20, and so in the quick menu, I can zoom up and down. I can smooth zoom up and down in 0.1 increments. So I can kind of, well, I wouldn't call it infinitely, but I can be in 0.1 increments anywhere between 2.5 and 20. So 2.6, 2.7, you know, 7.8, you know, wherever you want to put it. The intuitive quick zooming button is going to be the right-hand small button in the menu layout. Short presses on that are going to jump, you know, what we'll call jump zoom or step zoom you. So when you short press that button, it's going to effectively double you from whatever you're at. So if you're at 2.5, it's going to go to 5. If you're at 5, 10, 10, 20, and then once you get to the top, all the way back down to 2.5. So short presses on the button are going to effectively do that. Let's go ahead and kind of show you that. That squirrel's working his way down that tree over there. And so that's going to be how that functions. Additionally, there is a long press function on that button as well, just like there was on the left-hand button. So on the left-hand button, it inverted palettes. On the right-hand button, it is going to turn on and off the image stabilization mode. So we're going to long press it here, and you'll see that pop up down there on the information bar over by the little circle with the dot in it. And effectively, I don't know if I can really represent that, but what that is going to do is there is a margin around the outside of the display, a portion of that they're actually not visibly showing when you're looking at the display. And so basically it's going to try to use that margin to slow down any erratic action. So if you're in a high motion environment, or like maybe you're older and you're just having a hard time holding the thing still, rather than give you kind of that rough, everything is moving if you can't hold the device still, or you're in a high motion environment of that graphic moving around, it's going to take that margin around the outside and usefully kind of elongate or spread that movement out so that you're able to stabilize that central image a little bit better. And so as we move on across there, next thing we're going to see past the magnification is the microphone. Microphone's pretty simple and explanatory. If it was off, it would have a slash across it. Obviously it is not off, so it does not have a slash across it. Next one is the Bluetooth antenna. It is active and turned on. And then there's also, just to bring it to your attention, a Wi-Fi antenna symbol that would be in there if I had Wi-Fi on, which currently obviously I do not. Next thing across there is going to be the time. You can see it's 11:23 a.m. and then Next to that, we have the batteries. So the battery system in Oryx, much like it is in the Thermion devices, is hot swappable. So the internal battery is the #1 battery, and it's referring to a 3,000 milliamp hour battery that is built inside the device that is rechargeable. And the #2 battery is this battery here in the bottom, which is a fully removable rechargeable battery. And so the way the system works is whichever of those two batteries is white, which currently you can see is the #2 battery at 54% level, and the #1 is gray and it's at 99% level. That's telling us that the #1 battery is not the battery we're operating on. That's what the gray color is referring to, and the white color on the #2 is telling us that that is the battery that we're operating on and that it's at 54% level. If we pull the battery out in the #2 position, so let's go ahead and do that, the device will stay running. And you'll see where the #2 grayed out initially and then it went away, and the device kept running the whole time, and we stayed on the #1 battery in that position. And now we're holding the battery in our hand. So let's assume this was a new battery and we were going to swap that. So we would come in here. There are male and female grooves, female groove inside the device and a little bit of a male groove here on the battery. So you can only line that up in one direction. The cap you can rotate kind of infinitely to several points and lock it, but just make sure you lock it into position. And what you will see is now the #1 battery turned to gray and we switched back to the #2. So essentially the way that system is working is just like it was a reserve tank on like an old mini bike or three-wheeler. Is it's going to use that internal battery only as a last resort. And so if there's a #2 present, it's going to drain it first, give you the ability to hot swap that, and then go right back to that if you introduce a second battery. And then, it's using the internal for that reserve capacitance, and so it's trying to reserve that for emergency applications. So that's one of the key features of this device versus some of the competing devices on the market. A lot of the Chinese devices will have internally trapped batteries. So not only are you not able in a repair situation to change that battery easily and quickly, because that's the battery that's going to be being consumed the most, like in the case of this, it's going to give you an opportunity to have a second battery and be able to swap between those. And so it's a really important feature, and the way they've done it is really intuitive and useful. Up in the top left-hand corner, you're going to see the record timer has been running this whole time. It records, in case you're wondering why it's in chunks, it'll only record 5 minutes and then it stops, saves that video and starts another one. That's part of like trying to ensure that the videos get captured and that there isn't any screw ups in the system. And so that's why you might see that timer is not running consecutively, and that's what that's all about. But it's very easy to come back in post editing and throw them all together if you're doing something like I'm doing where you're recording a long period of time. But if for most people where you're not going to record past the 5 minutes, you'll see kind of the usefulness of it is that you wouldn't want to have a great big long video that had everything in it and maybe only needed the first 2 or 3 minutes. You forgot to hit record, but then the thing never gets saved. So I mean, they're really going out of their way to try to make that thing as capture those videos and save them in a relevant way as best as possible. And so if we were not recording, there would be a simple video camera icon up there, or what would look to be like a 35mm traditional point and click camera icon. Basically, if you're in that mode and you do short presses on what I'll call the video mode up here at the front, or the record mode, short presses on that forward button at again, the blue button at the very extreme front, power, next button back is what I'll call the REC button or camera button. So short press on that if you're in camera mode is just going to take one still image every time you click the button. Additionally, when you're in video mode, and that's represented by the little video camera up there, short press is going to start recording. You'll get the little red box that you're seeing and the timer will start up. If you would short press that again, which obviously I can't do it right now for what I'm doing, but if you would hit that button again, you would pause that video. So let's say that you're out there on a hill and a coyote comes out and he's moving around, and you start recording, but he goes down over the hill and he's out of your line of sight, and you go, man, I don't know if it's going to be 10 minutes before he comes back out. I could hit that button and pause, and as soon as he re-emerges, hit it again, and I'll get one continuous video and can kind of edit it as I go. So that's the benefit to that. But the reason I mention that is don't confuse that with stop and save, because if you just short press that and pause it, the video is just paused. Make sure you're doing, when you're done, you want to do about a 1 second long hold press and get that video camera icon back up there to let, to stop and save that video. That's what it's letting you know. And so then you're reset and ready to go again. So effectively, that's got us through everything except the laser rangefinder, which is what I'm going to show you next. So laser rangefinder button is this large button in the center. I mean, they've intentionally done it that way. So, when you're out there at night, it's easy to feel those buttons. Obviously I'm not doing it that way because I'm off the tripod here, but everything is kind of laid out intuitively. Doesn't matter if I'm left or right-handed, same button commands, same locations, very intuitive, good layout. If I'm out there and it's dark and I don't know where everything is spatially, once you've run it a bit, you'll get real used to it. But back to that laser rangefinder button. So when I push it, I'm going to get the laser rangefinder brackets up, and you'll see where the information boxes populate. If I want to take a reading, I'm going to push it to activate it, and I'm going to do a second push to take a reading. So a few things are going on there. You will see where I'm getting MOA information up in the ballistics information box. I'm getting a yardage indication in the LRF button in the top right. It's telling me my angle to my target. And then down by the center of the reticle, you'll see that little black box, and that's an auxiliary distance indication box. So that box, when I'm in the ballistic mode, is going to come up and it's going to associatedly tell me what the reading is a result of. And so where that's going to come into play is if I do a long press after I've activated and go into scan mode like I am right now, you'll see that as I am scanning around, I'll stop in some locations here, you'll see where I'm getting constant change in readings because I'm actually, moving that thing around. But my MOA is not changing and my ballistics are not changing, because I don't know, like in the most intuitive way to do that is the way they're doing it. So like, let's say for example, I've seen a coyote out there and I range him and I know where he's at, but now I want to scan the field around him and see if there's something else, but I may go back to him and need to take a shot. I need to have the ballistics information for that, and I don't need it changing around as I scan. While it might seem like that would be more intuitive, it's not going to be, because it's going to keep changing. I'm going to have to reacquire him, rescan it to get that MOA information. In this case, MOA, it could be mils, it could be another reading, but I'm going to have to reacquire that information. So it's much more intuitive if I just come back, to an object. If I come back over here and that was my distance, then I'm already locked on that. But if I decide, hey, I want to change to this target up in this location, I can click it again and you'll see where correspondingly the auxiliary box and the ballistics information box both changed along with my MOA. And so, like, especially as you get farther away, we're going to switch around and go this direction. So as I get targets that are a bit farther away and the field of view gets wider and I get in a situation where I might have something going on over in this location, where I want to take a reading, I could lock onto that. But then I could scan the rest of this field, and let's say that I get something over in this location that I want to reacquire. You can see where I can click that and reacquire it and get different ballistics information for that area. But if I just simply go over here and rescan, the ballistics information not going to change without me pressing that button additionally. And so again, if I want to take it out of the scan mode, long press on that button will take, we'll take the laser rangefinder out of the scan mode and drop it off like I did there, and that information will all go away. But that's, if you want to see that ballistic information in action and where that could be important, is like whether we're using it with another thermal device or a traditional daytime device, in a situation where I might have something in a really shadowy or hard to see into background where the thermal might be a better way to detect things and lock onto them in terms of taking range readings and getting that ballistic information. That is what the Oryx does, that there really hasn't been another device out there that will do it all in one. And that's why I'm showing this thing to you, because to me that is paramountly important. It's like if I was scanning a hillside for an elk or something, in the past where you might have sat there and glassed for a little bit of movement forever, with something like this, if it's legal to use in that situation in the state you're in, you could very quickly acquire a target. And even if you want to get more useful information, go to it with your spotting scope. Obviously, you're going to be able to do that, but coming in and out of that eyepiece and staying on things and taking range readings and this, that, and the other thing, not going to be nearly as simple as it is with this. Because if we're just being truthful, you get a lot of distance in you. Some of the rangefinders that are on the market today, while they might have good ranging capabilities, their ability in low light conditions in particular is not the greatest typically in the eyepiece in terms of visual acuity in those low light situations, or if something's working inside of a tree line or something where it's hard for you to even see it in the first place, period, with a visual device, or an optical visual device. That's where thermal can really excel. So again, really cool device. We're going to go through the main menu here in a minute. I'm going to lump this all into one video, and I'll try to break it out for you because I know it's going to be long, but we'll be right back with you. Okay, so here we are. We're going to jump into the quick menu. To get into the quick menu, I'm going to do a short press on what I'm going to call the menu button here. So just short tap, and you'll see it pops up over there on the right. It stays up about 3 seconds. And if I want it to come back up at any time, just a little short press to get that open. Additional short presses are going to toggle what's in the center of that menu. And then additionally, if I want to manipulate the things that I'm seeing in that menu, it's as simple as up button up button increases or down button decreases on the up and down toggle buttons. And so as I'm doing up and down, you can see where the values are changing. In the quick menu, I don't have to give it any confirmations and the menu is sticky. So like in that particular case, I just set brightness to 10. If I would turn around and open this back up by a short press on that button, you're going to see where I'm going to be right back at brightness and it's still set at 10. So like, give an example, I'm going to click to open it. There I am on brightness. It's at 10. Let's jump over to contrast and set it up to 14. Or actually, let's go to 15. So now you can see where I set contrast to 15. So I short pressed to get into that, short pressed again to switch from brightness to contrast, manipulated the button up to 15, didn't have to hit any additional commands or anything like that. But now if I short press to get back into that menu, to see where I'm right back at contrast and I'm at the level of 15. So that's kind of the point of the quick menu. It's meant to operationally be very intuitive for the features that not only you're performing at that time, but like preemptively, if you know that maybe, for example, I know the very next thing I may have to do is I may want to smooth zoom in and out. So I could simply short press here. This is the smooth zooming function. You can see where if I do short presses, I'm able to zoom in and out in 0.1 unit increments. And so if I have set my brightness and my contrast, I've got the image the way it's looking, and I know, okay, in this particular scenario, I'm not going to have to change that again, but the next thing I may want to do is come in and adjust that zoom level in those finite increments. Then I could set it up there. Boom, I'm one short press away, and right there it is. I just go to about adjusting it. I don't have to do those additional steps to get to that position in the menu. So once you understand that very well, makes it very quick and intuitive. Likewise, so in that menu, you're going to find the brightness, which is the sun looking icon, 0 to 20 value that you can dial into the image. Excuse me, I moved that into black hot. So we're going to short press there. We're going to tap down until we get all the way down to 0. And then you'll see I can run it all the way up to 20. And so you can see the effect that is having in the image. So basically, the way I like to do this, I'll start at the middle on brightness. I'll run my contrast up in a given scenario, and I'll run it down, and I'll be looking at the detail in the background, see where that's starting to wash out a bit on me. So I would turn around and reverse that to get a little more depth in there. And I'd say, okay, that looks about right. And so the benefit to setting it up like that is you can see where right there, I ended up with my brightness at a level of 10 and my contrast at a level of 16. If I wanted to dim that out, if I were out in a really ambient dark condition, I wanted to dim that out, and I say, well, how am I going to most effectively do that? Knowing that my brightness was preemptively set at 10, contrast ended up at 16. I know that's a span difference of 6. I could run my brightness down to 0 and set my contrast to 6. I'd get the same effect, but I would get a much dimmer image in there. So like In this particular case, if I round that all the way down to 6 right here, bounce over here to brightness and run it all the way down to 0, you can see where the image effect in terms of the depth in contrast is very, very similar. But at the same time, so what I'm seeing in there, but I'm seeing it much more dimly in there. So, everything got pulled down in tandem, kind of like the equalizer on a radio or something, stereo or something like that. So, effectively, that's how I would recommend you do that. And then additionally, we'd already went over the smooth zooming button. So let's jump over into the main menu. We'll long press that menu button to get into the main menu, and you can see there at the top, I'm going to very quickly scroll through these where there are 3 pages to this menu, and that's indicated by those little circles switching up there at the top. So first thing we're going to see is the position from the main menu, where we can change our amplification levels or our mode algorithms, and that's where you're going to find the normal, high, and ultra. And you can see, so I've got user mode shut off, and if you notice there, when I jump from normal to high and come back to normal, the settings are much different now than what they were when I had them set at the 0 and 6. That's because basically these normal, high, and ultra amplification levels assign preset or factory set contrast and associated contrast and brightness levels to each one of those amplification levels. And so if I want to retain the settings that I, the user, have put in, they give you the option of doing that. If I long press again to get into the main menu, that's what turning on this little toggle right here is going to do for me. If I turn that user mode to on instead of the off position, and so it's going to retain those settings that I override essentially underneath of each of those amplification levels and keep those, keep those in memory. The benefit to that is as a more advanced user, obviously you can customize those. The reason I would say, as a new user, maybe don't turn that feature on at first or until you understand how it works really well, is if you get those numbers kind of messed up and you have them locked on, they're going to stay wherever you had them set. And so the idea is they've tried to pick kind of some middle of the road levels to guarantee that if you get things way out of whack, you can quickly change those modes and get, like those amplification levels, and get right back to kind of a good happy medium, for each one of the 3 presets. So even if you do turn user modes on, just be aware if you ever get in that situation where your image is really screwed up and you think that maybe you got something way out of whack, at least know that you can go shut it back off. Okay, so we're going to long press again to get into that main menu, and you can see below those amplification level choices. So we've talked about that, and we've talked about user modes. In between there, we've got our color modes, which are essentially just the color palettes that we're able to see the gradient in, so that's the information that our eye is seeing. And so these are going to be a mix of color palettes that will give you either as much information in terms of detail in the image as they can. So like in white hot, where you get a really nice even gradient span and our eye can see a lot to black and white grayscale, you're going to get the best resolution to our eyes perception in like white hot or black hot. But red hot is going to use the white hot palette, but assign some red color to the top so that, maybe you don't get quite as good a resolution, but you get on a target a little bit quicker. And so, essentially some of the palettes, that's what they're designed to do, is give you faster target acquisition while giving up a little bit of resolution. Other ones are going to turn around and be set that in different environmental conditions, they're a little better. In the case of red hot and sepia, you're going to see in those 2 modes where, the green is another example of that, where it's a much more eye-friendly palette because you don't introduce as much white light to your eye, but because we don't see red grayscale as well, or, that orange to black gradient green we see really, really well, but it's still not quite as bright as white. So those palettes are going to give you a little bit better option in terms of eye fatigue, but not quite as, your brain's going to fight you a little on those because it's going to say you could see it better if you went to white or black hot. but at the same time, you know, in terms of effectiveness and being out there long periods of time and viewing through the display, sometimes one of those alternate palettes a better choice. But just be aware that that's what that does for you. It allows you to scroll through those choices and actively see them. You can see where I get to see what the effect is going to be in a given background as I'm scrolling through those, you know, so I can usually get a pretty good idea of how I'm going to like one of those. Below that, we're going to see the smoothing filter. The smoothing filter, I don't know if you can see that there. Let's show it on and off. So I would argue that in the on position, it's not quite as resolutionally sharp as it is when it's off, but the benefit to that is by rounding those edges and actually adding just a little bit of blur effect to the image in a really high motion environment, if I had a lot of things out in front of me that are moving around, or if I myself am moving while I'm viewing with, you know, using the viewer, it's a way to tame down some of what they'll call graphic fatigue a bit by taking some of those sharp edges off of the graphics inside of the display. And so it's not going to give you the best resolution. Some people, you know, assume that it's going to give you better resolution. It's not going to give you better resolution. It's going to give you a smoother image in terms of those high motion environments. But for most guys, the way that monoculars are used, I think, well, in a lot of instances, you're better with it off. But, you know, in some instances, obviously, you'd be better with it on. So, again, long press to get back into that menu. You know, so finishing up the page here, we've got the display settings. In display settings, you're going to see where there's a display dimming function. If I turn that on, you can see where the screen instantly got much, much dimmer. I'm hoping that shows through in the video. But, in really high ambient darkness, it gives you a way to kind of turn everything down without having to make wild correction. Plus, it gives you better ability to go down, you know. So like in the 0 to 20 brightness scale, if the bottom value was 0 in the normal mode with that display dimming turned on, it's like it gives you about 10 more settings in the downward direction to really dim that image out. So in some really dark ambient conditions, that can be vitally important. So with that said, we're going to continue to work inside that menu. You're going to see inside that menu as well, we can turn up the or down the interface brightness levels. So if we turn those down, you can see where essentially the icons on the screen are going down along with that. And then this last one in here is the auto display off function. That's a newer feature that they've added in some of the newest devices. So basically, little inertia trigger in there, and when that thing goes down away from your face, you know, it senses that it's in the vertical position and it shuts it off, and when you pull it back up, it'll come right back on its own, so that when a thing's, you know, like if you had it hanging off of a lanyard out in front of you, you're not getting all that eye spill out of the bottom of it. It's able to dim that light coming out of the back of that ocular eyepiece out by shutting that display. It doesn't shut it entirely off, but it puts it in that screensaver mode where you're not getting near as much light coming out of it, and boom, as soon as you pull it back up, it's right back on. So that's a benefit, obviously, to that. We're going to keep going. Now you can see where we're in the second page. We have the ability to turn on or off our image stabilization. So, you know, that one's pretty self-explanatory. If we toggle it over to on, you can see where now as I move it around, it's going to try to compensate for my erratic movements by using a marginal set of boundaries inside the image to kind of float that around and try to take some of that movement effect away. That I do find that to be pretty effective, and again, in those high motion situations, like if I'm operating from a vehicle or something like that, it does go quite a ways to smoothing that up. Secondly, a little bit older and just not as hand steady and operating that freehand, it does seem to make quite a bit of difference. So I do like that feature. If we long press again to get back into that main menu, the other thing I want to bring to your attention is down there on the stabilization. Along with that, there's a calibration mode. Basically, just put it in calibration mode, turn it on, set it on a table, and just let the, you know, or like on this tripod, and just let the thing set still, and it will calibrate for that stabilization, you know, so that it kind of gets a determination of what's, you know, what's actively happening in the environment it's in. So long press again to get back into the main menu. Next thing down is our PIP mode. We'll show you if I turn that PIP mode on, you can see where now I get a little set of inset lines that are going to reference me where the picture-in-picture block is showing up from. And so effectively in that PIP block, I am able to have anywhere from, but it depends on your unit, but in the case of this Oryx, it's 2.5 to 20. So I can have anywhere from double my base magnification up to the maximum magnification of my unit show up in that pip block. So in this case, it's a 2.5x base, so the PIP can be set anywhere from 5x to 20x. That's going to give me the ability to have that big wide screen sitting down there, you know, widest field of view possible, sitting there in the main lower portion of the screen, so that if I'm getting active movement or something going on out there, I'm likely to catch it, but yet I've got the little PIP box setting up there with as much magnification as I care to put into that, so that I can get a little more detail on something that starts moving out there. And that feature's been out for quite a while, but it continues to be one of the things that I get the most compliment about on the Pulsar device. So, you know, the Pulsar devices in general. And so again, long press to get back in there. We're going to shut that feature back off just so it's not showing up here in the video. In the Bluetooth settings section, obviously we've got an on-off toggle, and then we've got a Bluetooth pairing mode. So if you are linking to the StreamVision Ballistics app, you'll be using Bluetooth, so you'll need to turn that on. And, you know, on the first connection, you'll need to go in on the pairing mode, hit that button. On some devices, you have to do pairing every time that I go to connect it, but on most devices, just the first time, enter the password and then make sure the thing's on, you know, turn the two on together, and they'll just kind of automatically link up. But be aware that that is where you're going to turn those features on. We're right back into that main menu. Now we're looking at Wi-Fi settings, and Wi-Fi settings, pretty simple and explanatory as well. There is the on-off toggle to turn the Wi-Fi antenna on. Below that, we have the password. So each device now has its own unique individual 8-digit password, and you're not going to know what that is until you get the device. You're going to long press to get in the main menu, go to Wi-Fi settings, and look at that password line to find out what the password is on your device. Older devices, that was just simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In an effort to make the thing more secure and, you know, individually secure, they have started assigning individual 8-digit passwords to every unit. So that's where you're going to find that information. Down here on the access level setup, you can see where I have a choice between owner or guest. In the owner mode, I've got full operational control. In the guest mode, it's going to limit some of the controls. And then in the Wi-Fi banding, you can see where I've got the choice of a 5 or 2.4 gigahertz antenna signal output. So the antenna inside the unit is what you use in the StreamVision 2 application in order to be able to use the thing as a remote control to the device, or to be able to use, you know, stream videos over to it if you want to, you know, use it as a remote viewer, or if you're just simply sending your files over to your phone. That's, you know, that's essentially what that's about. And you have the choice, you know, depending on which style of antenna you have in your phone, of putting the output signal the same inside of the device. So long press again to get in there. That one there is really simple. That's either going to be on or off on the microphone. Simply going to turn the video microphone on or off. In the ballistics subsection, if you have ballistic profile set, you're allowed, in the case of Oryx, to have up to 5 of them. Mine's going to look a little confusing there because I've been doing a little playing around with some numbers in that one, and you know, I need to wipe them other ones out. But effectively, you can have up to 5 profiles in there. Basically, that's ballistic information for a scope that you may be pairing with. So in the case of this, I have it set up for a 6mm Creedmoor shooting 87 grain Hornady VMAX bullet. And so it is effectively capable, and I think you've seen that in terms of the MOA readings, of solving ballistics for that information that I've put in using that ballistics app. So, you know, anytime I'm ranging a target, it's able to tell me, you know, not only how far away that target is, but it's able to help me calculate the come up, so that, like, whether I'm using another thermal device or a traditional scope, and maybe, you know, I'm in a situation where right now I've got the sun at my back. If I was trying to look into that tree line with the sun straight at me, obviously I could do that a lot better with this thermal than I could do with any kind of daytime optical scope. Or maybe I'm wanting to look way off into a really dimly lit tree line, or I'm looking from one mountain to the next, trying to find a location for some elk or something like that. There's getting to be more and more and more uses for these thermal handheld monoculars, where that plus the ability to have a rangefinder plus the ability to have ballistics integration all in one unit is getting paramountly important. And so just be aware, that's kind of what the Bluetooth module is all about. I'm a long press to get us back into there so that you kind of see it as we're talking about it. But essentially I can pick the calculator units that it's going to show me, and I have several choices in there, so I can choose between a minute of angle, milliradian, click, simple click units. And the click units is fairly important. I mean, it's not really important in the sense that with like a traditional scope, probably going to be an MOA or milrad, or like inch at 100, something more in that tune. But if I was using it with another Pulsar device, there are some instances where I might prefer the clicks, because in the Ballistics app I can specifically pick my scope, and that scope may match up better in terms of click value, because on a thermal scope, your click values are almost always determined by the field of view, and so they're uniquely different between models of thermal scope. And so in some instances, that might be a better choice if I was talking back and forth, to somebody that was actually using a thermal scope that didn't have the rangefinder and giving their come-ups. That might be a better way for them in order to make those changes, but most of the time not. What's going to happen is we're going to share information in terms of yardage in the case of the Pulsar scope, and hopefully if they have a newer one, they're going to have put the actual ballistics into that scope as well and be able to just dial to the yardage numbers so they get them and let their scope solve the ballistics. So a lot of people don't realize that even if some of the Pulsar scopes that do not have a laser rangefinder still have the ability to calculate ballistics and allow you to dial the yardage. So with another Pulsar scope, it's much easier, because I could just range that, say it's 600 yards, and you could roll the dial on the scope if you have the ballistic profile installed to 600, and you'll get a suggested point of aim for the 600. So while this device currently will not communicate directly with the Pulsar scope and input the information for you, it's pretty easy to put that, pretty easy, fast, and intuitive to put the information into the scope itself. So again, long press to get back in there, make sure we're not missing anything. The one up here at the top basically just allows you to turn that on or off. So if for some reason you did not want that information coming into there, you had it in a ballistic profile, you can shut that off. If you're letting a kid use it or something, you found that to be a little bit confusing to them or something, for some reason you just want it off, you can turn it off. Again, long press up there, we're going to come down here to the laser rangefinder. In the laser rangefinder, you can see where we've got 3 different reticle type choices. Essentially, the reticle they're referring to there is the laser rangefinder box brackets. We have the information to see our target angle position, our true distance to target, and then our auxiliary indication distance box. That was the little black box down there that's showing us the information relevant to that last click position, especially useful when we're running ballistics. True distance to target is basically going to help you calculate the deviation angle. So like, it's going to take into account the angle from you to the target and the kind of the gravity drop distance between you and that target to help you basically to help determine the distance that's useful with relationship to the distance input from you to that target, including the angle information. And so again, long press to get in there. We'll go to the next thing. Next thing is calibration mode. In calibration modes, and I have a video that goes over that in detail. You have choices between automatic, semi-automatic, and manual. We kind of touched on that earlier, but that's where you're going to see the ability to change between those modes. And so you can access that right there, and there's the 3 choices. Again, in this main menu, anytime you're wanting to select something, you're going to arrow to the thing that you want to select and then short click in order to lock that in. So if you just, Unlike the quick menu where you could just go down there and drop on it, if you don't do anything, you'll see where it's going to maintain semi-automatic when it times out of that menu, versus me rolling up to semi-automatic and clicking it. So you see up there, down there at the bottom where I'm still in semi-automatic, it didn't change me back to auto. If I want to make that change, long press to get in there, short press to open the menu. I'm going to arrow down to that and then short press to confirm it. You can see where not only did it change on the main line, but it changed down on my information bar as well. So now we're going to get here into the general settings tab. When to start off, obviously, first line, you can pick a language, second line, date. Now we're on, where you can change the time, yards. Down here is the video compression. We can turn that on or off. And video compression on, basically you would get, you can store more video to your internal flash memory drive, but it's going to be at a lower quality or lower resolution than if you leave that off. So I recommend, unless you're just taking a lot of small videos and you're sending them via a cell phone and you really don't care if they're the highest quality possible, then I would turn that feature, like in the case of that, you could turn it on and make those file sizes a bit smaller, easier to send using a cell phone or, some data signal like that. But for most people, I'd recommend leaving that off and recording in the highest compression mode possible so that you're getting the richest video possible. Again, back into that menu. One thing I want to mention to you as I'm coming in and out of that menu, and hopefully you're noticing that, is the menu there is also sticky. So, anytime I've been in a position in the menu and I come out and I'm going back in, as long as I didn't turn the device on or off, when I'd long press to come back in there, you'll see where I'm already on the general settings tab. And if I root down, you can see there where we were on video compression. So, that short press to open the menu, and I'm right back where I left off. That can become important because I have some guys that are new to the device that will get a bit frustrated by the timeouts. And so just be aware as you're coming in, they have intuitively tried to make that tree structure kind of easy to navigate as possible by making those features sticky like that. So again, we're going to long press to get in there, short press to go into general settings, and you can see where we're already on video compression, so we know we want to go to the next item below that. So, we just arrow down, but it was pretty easy to get there. Auto shutdown options. You can see there where this is set to the 30-second 30-minute inactivity auto shut off. That's where I recommend leaving it. The only thing there would be is if you are, like, let's say, running a situation where maybe you are running there's a motion sensor in the app. Maybe you're running that and you might be letting the thing just set for hours on inactively. Then you might want to shut that off. But for most guys, leaving that turned on is going to guarantee that if you don't shut it down or you forget to shut it down, that it's going to shut itself off after 30 minutes of inactivity. But you do have the ability, obviously, to shut that entirely off. And so with that said, we're going to long press again to get in here. We're right back into that position. Next thing down is the power button light. And so on the power button up here on the front, there's an under light, and you have, I think it's 4 options in there. Yeah, so you can either turn it completely off, you can put it in auto, you can put it in day mode or night mode. In day mode, it's going to be very bright blue and very noticeable. If you're in a situation where it really doesn't matter if something in the ambient darkness might see you, that might be a situation where you want to put it in day mode, leave it on in case you drop the thing or something, be very easy to find it. But the night mode is going to, so there it's a pretty bright kind of whitish blue light that emanates out of that power button. In the night mode, it's going to be a real finite red dot that's hard for most things to see, but there will be a little bit of light there. In the auto mode, the sensor is going to switch between them, obviously, the day and night mode, but they'll come on according to the amount of ambient light around you. And then in the off mode, no light at all, So basically, that's your choices there. I'm going to long press again, long pressing on the menu button to get back into the main menu, and then short press to get into those subsections, and then using my arrows up and down to get to my position. So there you'll see where I have the haptic vibration indication on or off. Basically, that haptic vibration is just a little vibratory response on those buttons to allow me, the user, to know that the command was accepted by the program. You know, it's that it actually sensed that button push. That can really be beneficial in some instances, like out in the cold, to kind of get that little bit of vibratory response where maybe otherwise it might be a little bit hard to tell if you're pushing the buttons right or what have you. So I do, you know, it's one of them features that when it first come out, I thought, man, that's, you know, who's gonna like that? But the truth be told, I get a lot of compliment on that feature, and I myself have got to the point where I really like it. So again, long pressing to get in there. And then here we're going to see reset to factory default settings. Obviously, if you did need to do that, that's how you would do it right there. You know, it's pretty simple and explanatory. In the case of that, you know, you'd click on that button if you want to go back to the way the thing was when it come out the box. Effectively, you know, you're just going to go in, tell it, yes, I want to restore it. It's going to say, are you sure? You're going to have to tell it yes a second time, and then it'll reset itself. And then likewise, down below that, we're going to have format the memory card, which is essentially the same thing. If you want to format that video memory card, you're going to have to tell it yes with the double confirmation. That isn't going to wipe your profiles or anything like that out. It's simply going to wipe video and image, image captures that are on the flash memory drive completely off. Do be aware, you know, if you do that, it's going to wipe them all off. So make sure that you have those backed up, or you're in a situation where you're ready to lose those if you ever decide to format that. But it is a good idea to keep the drive tidy in case you would have any partition failures or things like that could over time, you know, like it could fill up or cause some kind of other little glitchy issue. So it's a good idea, you know, not to just let the thing maximally fill up. I think that gets us pretty much through the whole menu. The last thing here is device information. Obviously, device information just going to show you all your information about the device. It's going to give important information if you'd ever have problems or something where you kind of contact a tech. They might want you to look at that page and give them some information or send a screenshot of that. But I think that gets us through pretty much everything on the device. If I missed anything, I'll review this as I'm editing, put the thing up, and I'll call some other stuff into detail before we do the finish. But I think that gets us all the way through there. Thanks for watching. I'll be right back with you. Okay, folks, so here we are, about ready to wrap this up. It's took us a while to get here. Obviously, that video contains a lot of information, and I understand that. Again, that's why I'm going to catalog it and try to make it a little bit easier for you to search to the section that might be relevant to you. I just want you to know I really think that this device is an out-of-the-park home run for Pulsar. I think that not only is the night vision crowd going to appreciate this, but there's going to be more and more daytime hunters that are going to see the usefulness of these devices, whether it be whitetail hunting where we're walking in and don't want to be stepping on top of something, you know, in the early morning hours or late evening, you know, when we're coming in or going out to a stand, or, you know, maybe we're a little bit older and we're back inside the timber. You know, as I fall into that category where I'm getting to the point where I don't go anywhere without these cheaters, and I'm in a dim lit condition and it's hard for my eyes to color separate things. And so, you know, potentially having that device looking down through the woods is going to point things out to me that I would have easily overlooked without the thing. If I, you know, even with the best set of binoculars in the world, I'm still looking into a color blended scenario where I can't do that heat separation and immediately acquire or detect targets out there. So, you know, it's not just the ability of that the Oryx brings to the table. It's the ability to do that plus laser rangefind, plus, you know, have ballistics integration. If you can get ballistics integration and the ability to fast detect something that's 1,500 yards away, you know, with that LRF in combination with, let's say, your daytime scope, and you're out there elk hunting and you're looking from one hilltop to the next and you're able to find something really quick. Now I can go to my spotting scope and I can get the information I can without having to sit there in glass movement forever. I know right where to look, you know, and to go into that. Or if I get a shot opportunity, I can stay on, you know, and I'm spotting for somebody or I'm all by myself, I can come on and off that target and find its location very quickly and get range information and jump back and forth. Because if we're being honest, those are typically the situations where optical glass will struggle in low light conditions because it's hard to reacquire those targets. it's hard to reacquire those targets when we're young. As we get older and our eyes' visual acuity goes down, then it just, it becomes even worse. And so, it's one of those deals where if you can afford it, it's going to be a valuable tool in your arsenal of products that you could use, so I can't say enough things about it. Thanks for watching and have a great day.